Well, this past weekend, an 18-year-old girl took her own life in a public fashion in downtown Madison.
Normally, suicides are not reported in the media, and in this case, no one did report it except for the student newspaper, the Daily Cardinal. But this story took a few twists along the way, and Katy Culver, assistant professor from the UW School of Journalism, is with us to explain. Hi, Katy. Nice to see you.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Well, first of all, this is a tragic story, and a lot of people watching ask me all the time why we don't cover suicides, why they're not part of regular news coverage. Can you explain why that is?
I think there are a few reasons that ethicists say we shouldn't cover individual suicides or name people who die by suicide. And generally, it's that we don't want to try to send a message that this is something that brings in extreme amounts of grief out of fear that others may pursue that avenue themselves. Mm-hmm. There's also a concern about how families will respond, whether this is an invasion of privacy. So I think oftentimes this kind of coverage or lack thereof is well-meaning.
But social media does not live by those ethics.
Well, it doesn't live by those same traditional journalism ethics, but this may be a case where we're seeing it used positively, where we're seeing people saying, this isn't something that we want to attach a stigma to. This was my friend. I want my friend's name out there. I want people to know who she was and why she mattered.
Well, and in light of some of those positive things, do you think it's worth revisiting our ethics about this, revisiting our policies about it?
Right, absolutely. And I think the very first thing that news media should do, and I would encourage you to do, is to look at suicides not as individual events, but as a trend. It's certainly a very big public health concern. It's, it's about every 15 minutes in this country we lose someone to suicide, and about 90% of those or more are due to long-standing mental health issues like anxiety and depression. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to cover an individual's death, but you should be covering it as a public health issue, as a trend. I think it's also important to pay attention to how the conversation is changing. I think the very first positive sign I saw with social media was the sharing of obituaries, where parents were saying that after a long-standing battle with depression, we lost our daughter. And I think that's really positive, to open up that conversation and lessen the stigma.
Mm-hmm. Those are the positives. What about the negatives? What's the peril here?
The peril is, we saw in the Daily Cardinal story, for instance, people commenting and providing the name that wasn't coming from the family. I'd be more secure, or I would feel better if I knew that the family was ready for that, right. That it wasn't just friends making this commentary. So there are times that maybe the conversation is ahead of where the people who are most deeply affected are, and so I would be much more comfortable if I knew that that's where they were in their thinking.
Well, and it's not just the written word. Everyone has a phone with a camera on it. People are God forbid somebody was actually there and saw the scene and posted that on social media. That's a whole other range of ethical questions.
Given that this was public in nature, it had the great potential for social media to be used as part of the rumor mill, and that's why I do think that the Daily Cardinal made a very ethical choice in responding to this one situation and covering how the police were treating it and what the decision was in ruling the death a suicide. I think it was an important choice on their part because they knew what the conversation was among students on campus where it happened.
Times are changing, and we all have to adapt. And the discussion will continue.
And I hope they're changing for the better.
Katy, thanks for being with us.
Thanks.
Interesting as always.
Good to see you.